Hi, I'm Victor Lin, a former UCI Film School graduate, and I've been basically working with films my entire life. I've always been fascinated with the industry and wish to show the world the true behind-the-scenes processes of movies and reveal just how many intricate details go over the general audience's head without them noticing. Today, I'm going to try to highlight the importance of music in movie soundtracks and how it's used in various ways throughout the history of film in order to create a more effective piece. The music is usually ignored or taken for granted by the audience of the movie. They are often too distracted by what is put up on the big screen. But it is often overlooked that the music plays just as, if not more, important of a role within the film. Or as David Lynch simply puts, films are 50% visual and 50% sound. Sometimes sound even overplays the visual. Let's take a look at one effect of music that is used in many movies, which is basically the power to invoke emotional reaction from the audience. One of the studios that uses music in this context would be Pixar. In fact, they have basically mastered this effect, for they've created in several of their movies a soundtrack that reminds the audience of a specific feeling or character. Let's take a look at one of the more obvious examples of this technique, which would be in the animated movie Up. The director of Up, Michael Giacchino, creates one of the most memorable soundtracks using one chord throughout the entire movie and plays it differently in order to express different types of emotions or pace.
And I try and search for, okay, if I can sum up my feeling in one chord, what's that going to be? And for the film here, it was this. That chord right there, basically it's not F, it's not C, it's almost both. It's, an F major seventh, what it has is the tinge of sadness to it. I don't know, there's something about that chord that is very, it kind of reaches back.
Now, if we take a look at the first time this track is played, which is in the beginning, we will see it plays over a montage of Carl growing old with Ellie until he loses her. We can see that although it is one track and a continuous stream of music, the pacing slows down and becomes less and less cheerful throughout to symbolize growth. It continues this trend until it downright becomes a depressing soundtrack, almost unbearable, like seeing an old man cry over a loved one. And this is the point I am trying to make. Pixar is so good at establishing a song with emotion that, although only played once or twice throughout the film, it ends up becoming hardwired in the viewer's brain as some sort of emotion or memory. Then, whenever the director chooses to bring up the soundtrack again, the specific emotions and memories are also brought back into the viewer's head. And this is why Pixar's soundtracks are so memorable, because it was done on purpose. Let's completely flip the previous concept of using music as an emotional syncing tool and talk about this next technique, where music is used as an emotional distraction. This technique is seen being used in many of the modern movies we watch today. It is basically where the director tells the editor to put in a soundtrack that is often the opposite to the realistic mood within the scene, in order to either distract from the unrealistic aspects or the too disturbingly real. We can see from these clips of how the music completely sets the mood for the scenes. Now, if you're having a hard time remembering how a scene would feel if it were just raw sound design, here's a scene from Saving Private Ryan. Spielberg wanted to maintain as much realism as possible, and was successful in doing so by having mainly just the sounds of war barraging the audience's ears. This is to give the realistic effects of a gunfight, as AC/DC was usually not playing in the background of a real-life war zone. Now let's compare that to a different war scene from Apocalypse Now. It's almost trying to completely distract us from the loss of life. Here's a scene from Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. It's almost disturbing to watch through the whole thing, and the directors know that. In fact, Tarantino even goes and flips an imaginary switch halfway through the scene, playing a montage-like track over Django's rampage. Next, we have Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy jamming to Blue Skies as if everything behind him did not exist. This use of the effect blatantly erases all the realism and seriousness in the scene. What happens when we put the soundtrack to Spielberg's movie? It just changes it completely. And it's almost offensive how much its mood is changed. And the examples I've shown are basically the extremes of the technique. Most directors today prefer having a more discreet soundtrack in order to make scenes watchable, but not too drastically different from the original intended mood. And thus, they end up meeting somewhere halfway between the two extremes with a subtle soundtrack in the background that is not too noticeable, but there nonetheless. The final concept I'm going to highlight today is how music is used in movies almost as an extra character. Now what I mean by this is that it actually plays a key role in the movie, such as a storytelling plot device, the point of view of a protagonist, and many others. And it's a shame that the technique isn't used in that many movies today. But it's not surprising, as it is much easier on directors and the budget to just throw in a roughly edited temp track rather than to actually plan out and choreograph a scene to a pre-picked song. So what happens when you perfectly blend all these concepts together? Well, you end up with a groundbreaking movie like Baby Driver. Edgar Wright, the director of this movie, is a cinematic genius as he puts together this movie with the soundtrack in mind before planning every scene. From start, middle, all the way to the end. Now there is a lot I can talk about for these scenes, such as how the music syncs with the characters' actions, how the sound design of the background also matches the tune, or even the fact that music is how Baby, the protagonist, deals with his tinnitus. These are all brilliant ways Edgar Wright integrates his music into his movie, and it almost creates a new type of storytelling.